And welcome to the Aaron Katzman Show. I'm your host, Aaron Katzman, where we speak about your life, your money, and your investments. And as always, we're coming to you from the spiritual and soon-to-be financial capital of the world, Jerusalem, Israel. Be sure to like this at the bottom of the video. Hit like, right? That big little, that thumb, hit like. And if you've not yet done so, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tell your friends, your family, everybody to subscribe. We are continuing on due to popular demand. I keep saying that, but I actually have some people in America say, well, this is really cool. So we're just gonna keep churning these out. A continuation of our entrepreneurship series, okay? We're sort of putting personal finance and investing to the side, and we're focusing on Olim who've created their own business. And it's my pleasure today to welcome to the show Matan Bouganim, who is the owner of Erez Coffee Corporation. He is from California. He moved to Israel when he was 19. He joined the Israel Defense Forces as a lone soldier. Then he went to university. He dabbled in high tech, but then he really wanted to start a business, and he was fascinated with coffee, believe it or not. He started a company which produces over 15 flavors of cold brew coffee and other coffee-related products. I'd like to welcome to the show Matan Bouganim.
Hey, Aaron, thanks a lot.
So let's jump right in. What is cold brew coffee for those of us who like our taster's choice? What's cold brew coffee?
I'm glad you asked, actually. So cold brew coffee is, as the name suggests, it's coffee that's brewed cold, as opposed to obviously the traditional way, which is with hot water. And the way they do this you just soak coffee grinds in cold water for between 14 to 24 hours, depending on a whole bunch of other variables. But so it's actually really two things if you think about it. It's brewed cold and it's brewed slow. And the reason it's brewed slowed obviously is because of the cold water, but it's to extract over a longer period of time. And there's a few benefits to this. Number one, the taste is a little bit different. I think it's a lot less, it removes some of the extremes of coffee. Like when you brew hot, you can get kind of like a sour or a very bitter coffee. For me, cold brew kind of removes the extreme bitter, extreme sour.
Do you drink it cold? Do you drink it cold?
So that is a great question. Most people think cold brew is coffee that you drink cold. Actually, no, you can also heat it up. And that's why I like it, because naturally it lasts longer because it was brewed cold. It goes straight into the fridge after, but because it was brewed cold, the taste doesn't stale as quickly. Like if you brew a hot coffee and you don't drink it within like an hour, it's stale after that. I mean, you don't taste much of the flavor. With cold brew, the flavor is secure for at least 2 to 3 weeks. Wow. And it doesn't mean that it has no flavor after 3 weeks. It just, after 3 weeks, you really start to taste that it's kind of losing a little bit of flavor, but really it can last for a month and a half, 2 months. And when you heat it up, I think it's actually better than even like filter, French press coffee. I think it's amazing when you heat it up. But I like it cold as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
It's a little stronger when you cold brew as well.
It's stronger. Okay.
Yeah. And of course, you can cook with it. You can make cocktails with it because it's not hot. It doesn't, kill your ice when you put it in a cocktail shaker. When you're cooking with it, it's a lot more like full bodied. It doesn't have that sour taste. So if you're making like a tiramisu, yeah, I love it. It's the most versatile way to have coffee, I think.
How did you get into the coffee business and how did you launch Erez Coffee?
So I had the idea like 3 years ago when I was working at a school in Israel. I'm a teacher. I teach history and government, and there was something from like a historical sort of, political lens that I thought was really interesting about coffee, because historically it's got a very interesting, story, but also politically, I mean, coffee's not a contentious thing, unlike other industries, right? I mean, tobacco industry, very contentious, chocolate, very contentious, right? But coffee, I mean, like, it's not alcohol, right? Like, it's not, marijuana or something like this, where, people are extremely against it or extremely for it. At worst, you'll get somebody that says, "Oh, I don't like the taste of coffee." But in general, everybody loves coffee. Cultures don't have a problem with it, right? Like alcohol, Muslims or Hindus they don't drink. They do drink coffee. In fact, in the Arab world, coffee is kind of like a social beverage. So that's what kind of attracted me to it. The fact that it's just you know, everybody likes coffee. It's kind of addicting, it's like a major component in our everyday life for energy and, for workplace productivity and all that. And I thought that because it was so like prevalent in an everyday schedule, it's become sort of like mechanized and people don't really give it much of a thought. And I kind of wanted to change that. I wanted to bring like mindfulness to coffee. Like I wanted people to really think like, oh, okay, there's more than one way of drinking this. There's more than one, application for this coffee. I can try new, spices and milks and, all sorts of things in order to kind of, one, bring attention to, how different cultures drink their coffee. And two, to have fun with it. Cause I think coffee should be fun. I mean, it's a social drink. Right. So yeah, that's what really got me like passionate about doing something.
And then how did you get to cold brew? Like, there's a gazillion coffee houses in Israel, and how did you get to cold brew, which I don't think exists in Israel?
Yeah, so that's so it was on purpose because as I mentioned, it's so mechanized. Well, I wanted to break that, and one of the ways I thought would help break it would be to do something that's radically different from all the other preparations of brewing coffee, and do something that's cold, because right, like cold brew is the most different of them all. It doesn't matter if you're doing like a shot of an espresso from a machine, or in a mocha pod or an AeroPress, like you're doing it with hot water and ground coffee. Cold brew is cold water and a long time, right? So I thought that would be one way to break the stigmas of coffee. And number two, Israel's a hot country, right? Like people love coffee here, but people really drink cold coffee like 80% of the year because it's so hot. And the way that most people in Israel drink cold coffee is they make a shot of an espresso and they put it over ice and then add milk or water. And it's like, why? Just make cold brew. I mean, it's so easy. The flavor is there, so that's another reason, just how hot it was. But also, it plays nicely to different flavors and it can last a lot longer. So that's really the main reason. And it was cool because I like cold brew, but I couldn't get it here, like Israelis didn't. So it was also like, it just happened to be that if I were to do it, I'd be one of the first. And yeah.
So when you started, did you have any business experience whatsoever, or you just sort of just jumped right in?
Limited business experience, like my time, in university, I dabbled with, tech startups, and I really wanted to be like a tech entrepreneur. And I was at the, Negev Accelerator, a high-tech accelerator in Beersheba, right, for a bit. And so like, I mean, from like a tech entrepreneur standpoint, I had some experience in like pitching and, defining their unique selling propositions. And, I read books on business, like the Lean Startup, for example, but I didn't really have any. And this is what bothered me about the high tech scene was I wanted to actually go out and try and sell something and make, generate revenue. And like
Doesn't exist in high tech.
I mean, the thing is, in high tech it exists, but there's so much stuff you got to do before that, right?
Right.
Like, and it bothered me because everybody that like my friends that we tried doing multiple projects together on, they thought that was the hard part, and I'm like, no, I think the hard part is like making a business out of it, like. Like building a software is obviously not easy, right? But I think in terms of what is harder, I think taking that software and marketing it properly, generating revenues, profits, all that, I think that's the hard part. And it was like we were playing this game of like, oh, we've got to build, make this perfect. And I'm like, dude, let's build, release, try and make money. Let's see if there's a viable future for this product. That's the hard part. And so that's why I wanted to do something low tech, because I didn't have that experience in, okay, I have a product now. Let me see how good I can be at selling it and, adjusting to what needs to happen in order for it to be successful in the Israeli market, which is extremely difficult. So, yeah.
So you just jumped in. I mean, you went to the low tech route and you started a coffee company. Now, when you started it, did you I find, right, that I came to Israel and I started a business, right? I spoke the language, but I didn't speak the language, and certainly the culture was completely foreign to me. How did you find that? Like starting a business, not in California where you're from, but, in Tel Aviv.
It was really difficult, and it still is really difficult. My old business partner, Ronit, I say old, I mean, she had to move, my old business partner had to move to Texas about a year ago. And, we had to physically part ways, but we're still very close friends. And she still very much loves to talk to me about Erez Coffee because it's also her baby. But we have conversations about this daily. It's tough, like, I feel like as a non-Israeli, you really have to understand and how to understand and try and navigate around Israelis. They're so insufferably skeptical about anything new. And, it's like you tell them, oh, I've got a great product. I've got cold brew. They're like, what's wrong with Turkish coffee? It's like, well, there's nothing wrong with Turkish coffee, but like, try out a new product, it's a little bit different. You might like it more. And they're like, oh no, I'll stick to my, thing that I've been doing for 70 years. And it's like, okay, how do you, I feel like Americans, they're a lot more open to trying out new things. Where here in Israel, they're really skeptical. They think everything's a gimmick until it's not,
Mm-hmm.
and that was always really hard for us. It was also really hard for us to kind of navigate through a lot of the red tape that is in Israel. I felt like a lot of times, some of our strengths as Americans were like, we weren't allowed to really use it. Like we reached out to a company in Dubai about a year and a half ago, and we had like a little partnership going right when the Abraham Accords were signed, and using our English and our networks abroad in America, or like facilitating new networks in Dubai, we couldn't use it. Like, there's so much red tape in, bringing in agricultural products, for example, or exporting, or, the price of distributing, extremely difficult. When it comes to software, there's not that much red tape in terms of exporting your software outwards. But when it comes to a physical product, the costs just get exponentially more expensive. Not to mention all of the, regulations that you need to abide by. Kashrut, for example, is a really tough one. I would love to get some sort of kashrut, right? But it's so difficult in terms of, what we need to do from Misrad Briut, and then for the Rabbanut. And so that's also been extremely difficult for us is how do we, how do we make it in an environment that is extremely regulated and tight in terms of, because we don't have hundreds of thousands of shekels to throw at a giant facility to where, a rabbi can come and inspect. We're starting this up from nothing, right. And it's extremely difficult.
Wow. And then the health ministry has their own regulations, right? I know the whole food business here, it's not an easy business it's not an easy business because of all their regulations as well.
Right. And that's what it really comes down to, is like you get kind of smacked from, all around you, you're getting smacked. And then on top of that, you have, goods in Israel are not cheap. On top of that, you have the VAT, so right. An extra 17% on every other thing. And then, distributing stuff in Israel is extremely expensive. And post-COVID, everything went up. Prices of bottles went up. The prices of coffee went up, deliveries and all sorts of delivery services, right? And, getting our goods delivered to us. Everything went up. So it's extremely, extremely tough.
So speaking of that COVID, we were talking before the show, that your business really took off. Tell us about your COVID experience and now where you are, right? Post-COVID and sort of a confused world. Speak to us about sort of the last 2 years, because it was fascinating.
Okay, so when we started Erez Coffee, it was right before COVID. And we were sort of in the beginning. At that point, we still didn't even have like 15 flavors. We had like 5. We had our pumpkin spice, obviously, our pumpkin spice cold brew. We had 3 like normal cold brews, origin cold brews that were black. We had one, and we had the Vietnamese one with condensed milk, the Hanoi. So we had like we were also producing a lot less. We didn't really have the economy of scale. So we're still figuring things out. And then as COVID hit, Ronit, my old partner, she was like, what are we going to do now that, it looks like Israel's going to go into a lockdown? And I was like, well, we're not teaching because students aren't here and in school. And so, we don't have the choice. We've got to work. We got to make it happen. And she's like, yeah, you know what? Let's do it. And we both decided, let's really push like home packages. So we had like a bidud package where, you could send it to somebody who's in quarantine for whatever reason or who got COVID. And I would deliver myself on my motorcycle I had a duffel bag full of coffees, and I would just do my rounds throughout Tel Aviv, Givatayim, Ramat Gan, even Jerusalem, and deliver it to people at their doorstep. And after doing a bunch of campaigns during the lockdown, people really started to order because of this, like, support local small business. And we sort of got a, name for ourselves in Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And, people are like, oh, order coffee from Erez Coffee Co. They'll deliver right to your house. And so during COVID, the business really grew like 4 times. And it was actually amazing. I was so thrilled, it made me really happy, the support that people had. And it kind of confirmed that going the, direct to consumer route was really the smart idea. But then post COVID, that support local business sort of transitioned. Now that people were allowed outside, it sort of transitioned to like a support your local brick and mortar mom and pop shop. and because we didn't have the money to open up a coffee shop of our own. We were a strictly online business. A lot of people were out for the first time in a long time. So they wanted to sit at the coffee shop, sit outside, drink a coffee in the shop and support that. So we were trying to sort of pivot and, find a way to adjust to this new change. And we decided to go towards the corporate office, law firms, tech offices, and sort of deliver coffee to them. And the reason was quite simple. Selling our coffee to coffee shops just simply wasn't lucrative because they have to resell it, right? And so our profit margins are thin. On top of that, they're ordering a huge volume, and it's kind of hard for us to get that volume out when we're still a very small business. And the delivery of that is extremely problematic. But with the tech offices, it's one location, it's slightly less volume, but they're paying full price because they don't need to sell it, right? They're giving it to their employees. So we decided to go down that route, but then there's this funky period post-COVID, which we're still kind of in, where it's like people are still teleworking half the week, right? And so like they're not home enough to where they want to order a bunch of stuff home again. They're also not at the office enough for the office to really want to justify, getting their employees a bunch of coffee. So we're still trying to, figure out now what's the best route. Right now we're doing both. We're doing like office happy hours, and we're doing direct to consumer. But since the COVID lockdowns, we've sort of stagnated a bit in terms of, our sales.
This is for all the listeners and the viewers, this is the life of an entrepreneur, right? It's like you're always getting punched, right? I'm in a business where I'm regulated by 2 regulatory authorities, right? So, I have to get permission to breathe, basically. And, you're always trying to sort of reinvent yourself. But on the other hand, like, you're not giving up, right? You just sort of keep plowing through because it's just your personality, right? You're not going to throw in the towel because people are working 2 days a week in the office and 3 days a week at home.
All right. Yeah, you can't give up. I mean, survivability, I think, is like the number one thing that leads to success. Because, if you stay alive long enough, eventually one of those opportunities will be a massive opportunity. And so we're just, we're grinding. We're looking for that thing that will, propel us forward. And we're trying to adjust and be agile and, make the necessary adjustments in order to continue to grow. Because, I mean, it's also like from an ideological standpoint, it's important to me. I want to put Israel on the map of not just high tech. Everybody talks about startup nation. Why can't we also be the coffee nation?
Right.
Why can't we also be, like the food tech nation or just in general? I mean, Tel Aviv, people talk about the restaurants in Tel Aviv, right? But, everybody around the world knows Tel Aviv is also, and Israel in general is the startup nation. I want to be more than that. I want to have a bunch of different products in the shelves at the supermarket, not just the same products that we've had since the establishment of the state. I mean, since I made Aliyah 12 years ago, almost, the supermarket hasn't changed much. It's like the same cottage cheese, the same milk, and it's like, why can't we have 15 different flavors of cold brew coffee in the supermarkets? I want, tourists from Germany and from the United States to come to Israel and be like, wow, what country has amazing coffee? Israel. That's what I want.
So for Aliyah who are coming or have already come and made Aliyah, right? And they're thinking, I could do the grind, I could do the 9 to 5, or I could do 9 to 5, or I could, get into high tech and get into the rat race. Or I've always had this dream, of starting something. What would you, A, would you tell them to go for it? Number 2, give me a tip or 2 that you would give to an aspiring entrepreneur.
Well, it's kind of fitting, yeah, because it's like if another fellow Jew coming to Israel were to tell me I've got a dream, well, I'd say, well, the response to that, Herzl said it. If you dream, if you will it, it's no dream. So, those who really have this strong urge, this will to make it in Israel, you can do it, right? It can be done. Israel has its set of problems, but I tried to focus and not ignoring the problems ignoring the problems in Israel is not good either, right? I mean, like I'm very much conscientious of all the issues in Israel for an entrepreneur, but I try to focus on a lot of the tools that we have. Because even though you, for example, lose a lot of the benefits you get from America, for example, as an entrepreneur, right? America, huge market, money, capital, investments. In Israel, okay, you don't have a lot of that. You don't have as big of a market. You don't have that, but you have a lot of tools here too. And that's what young entrepreneurs coming from abroad need to understand is what benefits you have here and how to use it. For example, Israel village, right? It's a small little village, but in the village, everybody knows everybody, and so this like virality. I mean, it's something that you can achieve here. I mean, if people in the streets of Israel, in Tel Aviv or in Jerusalem's a great example for our coffee. Once 2 or 3 people in the neighborhood know about your, business or your product, they'll tell everybody. That they will send mishloach manot. They will tell everybody. I mean, Shabbat, they'll bring it. And I think that this is one of the good things that an entrepreneur can focus on is the networking, the desire to help one another out. So yeah.
That's funny you say that. We've heard that. I've heard that on every single interview. That
really?
Everybody says that when they were starting there, it comes more a little bit differently from a different angle. But whenever anybody was starting their business, people were just willing to talk to them. Like they would drive from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv just to speak to you, get nothing out of it, but just like give they're opinionated, right? So everybody has their 2 cents, but they're willing to help and talk with you and the whole thing. It keeps coming up sort of that same angle you're talking about one way or another. It's really, really interesting.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's incredible. I mean, for example, I have a customer, Yoav, and about 3 years ago, we had there was never mind the issue, but he said something that was along the lines of he was kind of disappointed, right, about the product. And it was on one of the Facebook groups, right? And I told Renee, I was like, we have to turn this guy. We have to convert him to love us, like I can't have it that somebody doesn't like the product. He's now like one of my best, most appreciated customers. He's been with us almost since day one. And like I tell everybody, like there are now 3 things in life that are certain: death, taxes, and Yoav ordering cold brew on Wednesdays. And it's like when you get loyalty in Israel, you get loyalty from the entire community. Yoav, like ever since we made him our, a friend in the business sense, I mean, he's referred us to literally, I think, everybody in his contacts in Jerusalem. I attribute Jerusalem's success to him.
Wow.
And it's like, this is some of the cool things about Israel that young entrepreneurs, young business people should take advantage of. Do your best to make the community love and appreciate you and your product, and they'll show you by helping you out. And it's really a breath of fresh air, especially when dealing with so much of the hard stuff that comes with Israel.
Wow. Matan, that was awesome. How can people get in touch with you?
So on our website, erezcoffeeco.com, all of our information is there: phone number, email. They can just message us freely or call.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's like a link to our online store. There's also like a description about each of our products and like what we're trying to do in terms of coffee in Israel. We're trying to make things fun. We're posting about different recipes for cocktails, things like that. And whether they want it for their home office, something like that, contact us through the website, erezcoffeeco.com. Yeah.
Matan Bouganim, who is the owner of Erez Coffee. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Aaron. It was a pleasure.
You've been tuning into the Aaron Katzman Show. We speak about your life, your money, and your investments. Be sure to like this program. And if you've not yet done so, please subscribe to the YouTube station. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll speak to you soon.